Hey guys, welcome to the YouTube Moms Book Club. This week we are reading Chapter 1 in Moms Who Changed the World by Lindsay O'Connor, and Chapter 1 discusses the life of Susanna Wesley. Susanna Wesley was the mom of John and Charles Wesley, who were the co-founders of Methodism. Her son John wrote over 200 books and preached over 42,000 sermons during the course of his lifetime, and Charles wrote over 8,000 hymns. So they definitely left an impact and a legacy, and much of that was due to the way they were brought up and raised by their mom. So that's what we're going to talk about this week, and I'm just going to summarize a little bit of the chapter, share some of the things that I was able to draw and take from it, and I have some questions for you guys at the end of this video. So Chapter 1 opens up with a description of a chaotic morning in the O'Connor house. Lindsay was trying to rally up her kids and get out the door, and it was just one of those mornings where you've got 4 minutes to get out of the door. You call the kids downstairs and they're supposed to be ready to go, and half of them don't match and the other half haven't brushed their teeth, and you just give them a tic-tac and say, we've got to go, type of morning. So she's describing that scene, and later in the afternoon she had the opportunity to have a chat with a friend, and that whole topic of routine and structure came up, and her friend shared with her about a person who was a source of inspiration in her life. And so that got the author of this book thinking about Susanna Wesley, because she's known for her disciplined faithfulness and being a very structured person. So that's how the chapter opens up, and then she takes you back in time to imagine what it would be like to be in the Wesley house and to meet Susanna. So she goes back to 1712 on a cold winter night when Susanna is hosting a Bible study in her home with over 200 people in attendance, and as people begin to leave, she imagines herself going up to Susanna and asking or saying, I noticed that your home is so different than other homes, and your children are different, behave differently than the other village kids. Can you tell me a little bit about your methods of parenting? So that's how the kind of course that this chapter takes. And then at the very end of the chapter, the author writes a letter to Susanna of things that she would tell her if she had the opportunity to go to tea with her. So it's a really neat format and way of writing. And I was just really impressed. I never really read anything about Susanna Wesley before. Like I said, she was a mom of disciplined faithfulness, and so those are the traits that we take a look at this week in Chapter 1. Her son, John John said, I learned more about Christianity from my mother than from all the theologians of England. So that says a little bit about her parenting and the impact that she made on her children's lives. So let's just talk a little bit about some areas in which she was disciplined. She was very disciplined in her routine. She was a mom who believed in and practiced a disciplined routine. She had a careful structure for all of her days and her actions. She believed in teaching her kids the method of doing things from very early on, from whenever they were able to start doing things independently. They were responsible to get themselves dressed and undressed and change their bed linens and all of that. She was very methodical. She also had set times for everything. One quote in the book was from Sandy Dengler, who wrote a biography on Susanna Wesley, and she wrote about their evening schedule, that bedtime preparations began at 5 o'clock. They ate dinner at 6, they held devotions privately at 7, and they were all tucked away in bed by 8 o'clock. So she was very disciplined when it came to routine and scheduling. She was also very disciplined when it came to child training. She was well known for excelling at training and educating her children. She homeschooled all of her kids, and they did school 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. Something that she took very seriously. She had a pretty firm stance on child training when it came to discipline and spanking. She was very disciplined in her own personal devotion and spending time in the Word. And I think she spent something like 2 hours a day just studying. So, you know, if you do the math, if she did school 6 hours a day and personal devotions 2 hours a day, that's 8 hours of her day taken up right there. So she was a very busy lady. She was also she's also known for her faithfulness. She was faithful to her husband. She married somewhat of a domineering, strong-minded, strong-willed type of man who wasn't the best at handling finances, but throughout the years she remained faithful to him and was an example to her children in that respect also. She was very faithful in training her children. She took the utmost care to teach them about God and to give them a biblical understanding and a Christian education. She actually wrote expositions for her children to read, like a manual of doctrine, exposition of the Apostles' Creed, an exposition of the Ten Commandments, because she wanted to be sure that they understood those concepts. She also spent 1 hour a week with each kid individually, just to see how they were doing and to spend time with them one-on-one individually, which I think is really, really inspiring. And she was also faithful to God. She birthed 19 children, and only 10 survived past infancy. So she was faithful to God in her devotion to Him, even in spite of losing so many children, in spite of her house burning down, in spite of not the most amazing marriage ever. She remained faithful, and her whole life was about training her children to know God and to serve God. So that's why she's so inspirational and why she's worth taking a look at her life and talking about. What I really took away from reading this chapter that I didn't know about Susanna Wesley was, she was known for her rigidness and her structure and routine and her dedication to training her children, but it didn't come from a heart of, I want my kids to be in bed at 8 o'clock every night so that I can have my own free time. And it wasn't about, let's do school 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, because I want my kids to be the most well-educated. It didn't come from that sort of heart. Her heart behind the way that she disciplined her kids and was so structured and scheduled with them was because she wanted to teach them very early on how to control that self-will, that sinful nature that we all have. And she felt that if she could teach that lesson to her kids very early on in life, that they would be better off for it, because that's the hardest lesson we all have to learn, to walk in that mode of self-control, and the world doesn't revolve all around us and our wants and needs. And so she felt really strongly that being structured and being rigid and being disciplined and routine and teaching her kids the respect for authority early on was the best way that she could teach them to live a humble life and a life in service of God and to know God. So she was really, really quite a lady. I found this online. This is, I'll post a link below. It's the 16 Rules of Parenthood by Susanna Wesley. So these are just an example of 16 rules that she had for her home. Eating between meals was not allowed. Children were in bed by 8 p.m. They were required to take medicine without complaining. She believed in subduing the self-will in a child. She believed to teach a child to pray as soon as they could speak. She required all to be still during family worship. She would give them nothing that they cried for and only what they asked for politely. To prevent lying, she didn't punish any fault which was first confessed and repented of. She never allowed a sinful act to go unpunished, and she never punished a child twice for a single offense. She always commended and rewarded good behavior. Any attempt to please, even if poorly performed, was commended. She believed in teaching her children to preserve property rights and stewardship. She believed and teaching her kids to observe all promises that they made. She didn't require her daughters to work before they could read well, and she believed in teaching her children to fear the rod, so she believed in spanking. But like I said, what was most inspirational about her, of course we can look at her lifestyle and, admire her for her routine and structure. Those are all things that we strive for. But again, what spoke to me most about her method of parenting was just that it all came from a heart of wanting her children to know God and to teach them very early on that respect for authority and teaching them to subdue that self-will and that selfish nature. I found a really neat little story about her and one of her daughters. It says, one day one of her daughters wished to do something which was not altogether bad, but which was not right. When she was told not to do it, her daughter wasn't convinced. It was late, and she and her daughter were sitting beside a dead fire. Her mother said to her, "Pick up that bit of coal." "I don't want to," said the girl. "Go on," said her mother. "The fire's out, it won't burn you." "I know that," said the girl. "I know it won't burn me, but it will blacken my hands." "Exactly," said Susanna Wesley. "That thing which you wish to do won't burn, but it will blacken. Leave it alone." I thought that was a good little story. So, yeah, that's kind of what I took away from this chapter. Like I said, again, she was very inspirational in the way that she was so disciplined in her life and structured, and the way that she was faithful despite the hardships that she had to endure in her life. But what's most meaningful in her life, from what I read, was just her heart of wanting her kids to know God very early on, and to learn that hard lesson of subduing that self-will and that selfish inclination in all of us from a very early age. And I think that's a good parenting tip to take away from her life. And I just want to know about what you guys thought about this chapter, so leave comments below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what areas you struggle in maintaining routine and structure in your home, but also let me know what has helped you to maintain a routine and structure and orderliness in your home. Okay, and I also want to know what you guys do to focus the way that you discipline your children to God, and how you teach them about subduing the self-will and that selfish inclination that we all have. So let me know what you guys think. Leave comments below, and we will see you next week for chapter 2, which is on Margaret Ruskin. And just FYI, so you guys know, in the back of the book there are recommended resources. So if one chapter or the topics in the chapter, because each chapter discusses like a different character trait and parenting method. But if something really sticks out to you, check out the recommended resources for further reading on that. And I just want to throw that out there, that if you guys were really inspired by chapter 1 and reading about disciplined faithfulness and child training, another book that goes really well with what we just read in this chapter is Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp. So just thought I'd throw that out there, and I hope you guys have a blessed weekend. I'll talk to you later.